Hey, what's up everyone? Lucas here, and this is video number 11 in the GeoPix dev blog series. For those of you who don't know and stepping into this now, this is a video update series going through and kind of journaling the progress of my development in GeoPix 1.0. And if you don't know what that is, it is the successor to GeoPix 0.9, which is a software product I developed several years ago for the purpose of pixel mapping and live show control when it comes to LEDs. But there were several issues with it that I had personally, and one of those issues was its lack of DMX lighting support. That's a really big part of any show, is running a fog machine, running movers, running power cans, running whatever else runs off of DMX. It's a pretty big industry standard. So instead of integrating that into what I felt was subpar programming on my part, I had learned a lot since then. Uh, I decided to rebuild it from the ground up and call it GeoPix 1.0. I'm not sure that naming scheme was particularly the smartest move because it sounds like it's just this much more than 0.9, but in fact it's an entirely new piece of software built from the ground up, not a single thing brought over from the old one. So that said, let's just dive right into it. I've got some cool stuff to show you this episode, which is going to be new. And yeah, so here we have a different looking window. If you've been following along, you're probably used to seeing me fiddle around in the viewport and talk about stuff here, and there's a lot to talk about here. But there's also this new tab called the I/O tab. I'm going to come back to this and show you how it actually works in conjunction with everything else. But for now, let's just say this is how you get information into your software, into GeoPix, and this is also how you patch things together to make it show ready. So again, come back to this in a little bit, but you can see that there's a few different types of tiles here. We have clips, effects, MIDI, generators, and this is a two-dimensional viewport, so this is actually pretty open, so you can move around, zoom in and out, and there's going to be the ability to expand this in the future with all kinds of new forms of input. So, okay, I've got my list here. I've got so many things I've worked on, small things, bug fixes, just small improvements. I'm not going to talk about any of those. I'm going to really focus on just the big main improvements and the things that you may or may not notice, but have drastically changed since last time. So, one of the first things and one of the most important things for development, as well as I think a user experience, but it has sped up my development a lot, was the implementation of a proper attribute editor. So previously, I don't need to go into the back end too much, but I had a system that would let you set attributes of an object. So if I have this this tile right here, this primitive, I could go in here and type a number in, and that works the same as it did before, but now we have a much more abstracted attribute editor that I can use anywhere in the software. And for you, the user, it actually functions a lot more like something you'd be used to in Maya or Max or Blender. There's lots of different ways to set the values. I think that's the biggest thing you'll notice. So for example, TX, I can use the mouse wheel and I can just scroll up and down, and that'll actually move this through a certain min and max range. Same with TY and all the others. There's a few that don't have the scroll support that don't really make sense, like a button. However, they all pretty much have the scroll thing if it's a value field. And you can also type in a number, and that works as well. And this also works for multiple objects, so you can scroll multiple objects. In addition to the scrolling, which is probably the way most people will just tweak stuff roughly, you can also go in here with the right mouse button and you can right-click drag as a slider. So just a quality of life improvement into how you tweak things. Obviously, if you want to get precise, you're going to want to type in numbers. But this is great for tweaking things, for adjusting values on the fly, seeing what looks good. One thing the scroll wheel is really useful for is drop-down menus. So here we have a new slot where you can actually pick your primitive type. So there's a few types here, the same ones as before. I can pick a cube, I can pick a plane like I had before, or I can use the scroll wheel and I can just slide through this menu really quickly. So this is great, and this is going to be used everywhere in the software soon. And yeah, I'll leave that at that. So another thing, and it's more of an aesthetic thing, everything has become dynamic and flexible. So in the UI, you can scroll vertically and resize horizontally. That's the general rule I'm sticking with in the authoring and design sections of the software. Lost my attribute editor, there it is. So yeah, I can grab this and I can resize it, which is nice. If you have something with a lot of resolution, you can get yourself a little bit more resolution there. If you don't care and you're just typing in numbers, maybe you want this smaller. So lots of different things you can do with that. Over here, you might notice these little tabs, and there's actually a few more of these in the software, but I'll talk about these first since they're here. This is the outliner. The outliner has been redone, I don't know, probably 4 times at this point in the software, and every time I come up with a slightly different way of doing it. Before I had this geometry-based outliner that kind of hovered over the viewport, which was nice. It was kind of interesting in some sense, but I actually ended up going back to a different format here, which is a little bit more traditional looking. It's a little simpler. It's a lot faster in the back end as well. So that's been implemented. We have these eyeballs here, so you can turn off the display flags for objects here. So if you turn off a object's display and you lose it, it's like, oh, where is it? You can actually just go over here and find it and turn it back on. So another one of those things that you find in most softwares that have a viewport, but just need that in GeoPix. So Viewport Chance, this is an entirely new thing I've built since the last update, and this will be best explained here in a moment. I'll come back to this, but just know that these are all collapsible, conditional tabs that just basically give you more functionality based on either what you have selected or what mode you're in. So to kind of give you an example of some of the other ones, we have, let's go ahead and select a fixture. Select this one right here. Go over here to Pix. You can see we have 2 more that popped up here. We have coordinate map and we have raw data. I can't remember if I showed you raw data last time, so I'll show you again briefly. All raw data is a text field that you can grab this text, you can take it to Notepad, or you can bring it in from another software, and you can paste your coordinates directly into the software and it will update what you see in your fixture. This is useful if you have a very complicated pixel map and you need scripted control of generating those points. I've known a lot of people to use I think it's called Rhino, no, Grasshopper, which I think is owned by Rhino. I could be wrong about that, but Grasshopper is it's good for generating points apparently, and lots of people I've heard use it for generating points that they've used in other softwares, and a couple have used it in GeoPix 0.9, so that's been kind of interesting. So this is there for those of you hardcore programmers who want to lay out some crazy layout and bring it in just like a few steps. So yeah, alright, so we got coordinate map, which is actually another thing you probably haven't seen before. This is a little bit different. This is based on what you have selected. So if I have a few picks selected here and I just move my marquee box around, you can see that the highlighting on the right there in the channel map actually changes in real time. So that of course shows you which pixels or picks you have highlighted, but once you have something selected here, you have these buttons and you can actually toggle them on or off. And as you can see over here in the chance field, we're actually updating that field in real time. If this was here in the last video, then you may be familiar with it, but I'm going to go and pretend like I didn't show you that, so I can go ahead and go at this from the ground up. Chance is a field that lets you specify what your pix is controlling. So this software, GeoPix 1.0, is supposed to be able to control DMX lights and pixels in the same environment with the same tool set and system. This is going to be really powerful because this means you can apply content to DMX fixtures, arbitrary channels. You can have a texture that pretty much controls your fog machine, or it can control the pan or tilt of your movers, or you can have it control your red channel of your just WS2A 12B pixels as well. So it's going to be very flexible in that sense. So what channels does is it lets you specify what a pix, which is a point, what it's controlling, what channels is it responsible for mapping. And you might notice these confusing, distracting yellow boxes. That has a lot to do with this too. We're going to get to that here in a moment. But just to show you, all of these here right now are set to RGB. And as you can see here, this isn't changing. But if I change this to, let's say we have a mover, and it would actually be RGB pan tilt. It would be a 5-channel fixture. I'm just making this up. Okay, so our channel map will update accordingly to show all of our picks, and also the one that we have selected here. And as you can see, the P and the T now exist as columns, and they're also highlighted for row 7. So this would be how you would configure a series of DMX devices that are on a universe, for example. You would have maybe the first one is red, green, blue, the second one would be pan tilt, so I would go over here and I would turn that off. And the reason why these deselected as well is because I had 7 selected. So if I have none selected, then I'm pretty much just affecting what I click on. And so once you configure your channel map, you'd essentially have this information in the back end that's already taken care of, and all you have to do is start applying content to different channels, and all of the filtering and parsing happens automatically and dynamically. You don't have to worry about it at all. So this is going to be something I go into big detail in on video number 12, which will be the next video. So for now, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but just know this is kind of the beginnings of how you control DMX lights and pixels kind of in the same way. So that's that. We've got a few other things here in the outliner. Let's see what I'm missing. Cool. I think that's about it, actually. Channel map for pics. Data entry, save load. Okay, so the last thing to show you in this tab before we start talking about the I/O tab and the projectors that I've added just recently is the save, load, and export functionality. Just another one of those things that everyone kind of expects to have in their software. But let me go and show you how this works. So I have my outliner, nothing selected. Let's go ahead and say I want to save everything to a file and just save my scene. Right? This would be how you save your entire project out. Up here under data, these buttons have been here for a long time, but they actually do something now. If I hit save, you can type in sample demo file, and I can save this. And let me actually pull up the text file, and I can show you what this looks like. So this window is going to be stuck on top, so I may actually have to scoot this over. Okay. The way I've got my screen share set up, it's actually tracking my window, so I'm just going to tell you about it. There's a text file, and it's got every parameter of every object you've basically got in your scene, and it saves it to text file and puts that on disk. So if I hit new and clear out everything, whoops, better refresh bug there. If I go ahead and create something, that'll go away. There we go. Okay, so if I have load, and I load my file, sample demo file, this will pop back into existence just like it was before. So nothing crazy, save load functionality. If I move this up and I hit import, this is a little bit different. You can import both a save file and an exported prefab, which is essentially the same thing. I've exported part of this before the video. I named it Big Small, and there it is. We have our imported piece. So this is a good way for you to build up your scene from pieces. You can make, say, a strip prefab, or maybe it's going to be something you have on a stage. Maybe you have like a tower of LEDs on a couple panels, and this would be like a prefab of its own. So when you show up for a show or you've got a project, you can basically just throw all of your prefabs together in your scene, things you've already saved out and built in the past, and you can very quickly put together your scene from stuff you've already used in the past. So if you're the kind of person who gigs and tours, or you just have lots of your own hardware you've built over the years or acquired over the years, once you create profiles and prefabs for all these objects, it's just going to be really quick to dump these back into your scene and hit the ground running in 5 or 10 minutes. So that's the purpose of prefabs. So you can pretty much do that. Okay, next let's talk about the I/O tab. So as you can see here, one last thing, because this is actually related to the I/O tab and DMX lights, these fixtures here at the top, the ones that are kind of strobing white, you might have noticed that the size of the pix is actually larger than these. That's due to a new parameter here called pix scale, which you can actually adjust the mouse wheel. You can type a number in, and this is purely a visual aesthetic thing. It allows you to set a different size through a range. It's a pretty small range right now, but it lets you scale up your points so that you can visually identify them easier. So if I was setting up a stage, these here would actually be maybe my park cans, right? Maybe my movers. Although my movers are going to have a different thing. In the next video, I'll talk about that. It'll be an actual mover object that kind of pans and tilts, and you can see the whole thing previewed in your viewport. But for now, and for other fixtures that maybe are more abstract or we don't have a specific profile for, this simple size lets you kind of differentiate between your pixels and your other fixtures. So stuff like that. And the reason why these are doing something different than the green ones here is because of these yellow boxes. Now these yellow boxes, there's a new object you've seen here probably in the outliner as we've been talking called projectors. Now these are not to be confused with a literal projector which would project light at a wall. Although the concept is really the same, you're projecting your content at your LEDs. So and GeoPix 0.9, the way we handled this was through Smart Clips. And Smart Clips is a 2D editor that lets you import a video clip, and you had the handles in the corner that let you resize them and place them and stretch it. But that was about it. That's about all you could do. So with projectors and in a true 3D environment, right, you start to really get some amazing results from this. And you get amazing results with the simplest content. And I'm going to show you that here in just a moment. But projectors are per channel. So as you can see here with this top one selected, I have P and T set for my routing information. And then I have R, G, and B set for this bottom one. So that might still be confusing. I'm going to explain how that works here in a moment. And I think the best way to go ahead and do this is to show you the I/O tab and then start from scratch in the viewport and just build something up from the ground up. So here in the I/O tab, let's talk about this real quick. This is how you will get content into GeoPix. So right now, and the most basic example is a video clip. A lot of people just VJ with video clips, and obviously that needs to be supported. So one of the first things I built in this tab was the ability to import clips. Let's go and delete everything. Okay, there's two things left because, well, you can ignore macro. That's just a work in progress. Default will always be there. There might be a few more by launch. They're just default ramps, right? Stuff that always shows up as a default if nothing else is going on. This lets you just start testing and playing around with things very quickly without loading your own content. But this is essentially a blank canvas, and so when you get started, you want to bring your content into GeoPix so that you can start working with it. And the first thing you might want to bring in are just plain video clips. So here you can actually pick a folder. If I click Browse, I can pick a folder, but I'm not going to because it's already set to a folder that has some sample content in it. So once you do that, you pick a folder, you can hit Add Clips, and it's going to add those clips to your viewport here, your two-dimensional canvas. In my case, I just have a few clips. There's a couple people clips and just a couple ramps I have that were in half-Q format. And you'll notice here we got a little orange bar that goes up and down. This is your timing, right? So 0 to 1, 0% to 100%. This is just a number representation of the same thing. And then here we have RGB that shows you this is an RGB texture. There's 3 channels that you can use, and you can put those channels anywhere else. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. But so clips, this is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. I can select stuff, and I have a few options over here. As one of them is, a file, so I can actually just change this and pick a new file just specifically for this guy. Or I can turn the alpha. So if I have a texture with an alpha, I can turn this on. And as you can see here, we have RGBA. So that essentially gives us an extra channel to use. I won't talk too much more about alphas now. It's just basically another channel to hold information. Most people's content is probably going to be RGB, so probably won't be useful to that many people. The preview toggle just lets you turn it on and off. And then we can also position things in our canvas. Right now there's not a way to do it with the transform tools, but that's all coming. It's going to be in the next update, maybe this one after that. Yeah, and this section here will grow wildly probably by the time the next video comes out as well. There's going to be a lot more parameters that you control per clip, and that's going to give you a lot more control on how you use the clips. One thing I want to do is give you the ability to scrub through the clip with an input. So that input could be a MIDI controller, or it could be a generator or a piece of audio, right? Anything that's basically generating a signal can pretty much control that. It won't be long before I have OSC support and DMX-in support and other kinds of inputs that will basically allow you to control things from a wide variety of sources. But for now, we just have a few of the basics here. I mentioned MIDI, so let's go ahead and skip around here and jump to that. I have my APC 40 Mark II. It is plugged in. But I'm not getting any. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so you can see here we have Chan and Index, which are things with MIDI if you're not familiar, and I'm just moving sliders around on my MIDI controller, and you can see that the channel and index changes. So that's because every slider and knob has a channel and an index, so you're basically seeing automatically what knob you are moving in terms of its channel and its index. So I'll use my my crossfader for now. I'm just going to add that channel down here. So as you can see, we now have a MIDI controller, and this MIDI controller channel or input is essentially two things. It's a channel and it's also a texture. So you can see the texture is just a black to white texture, and the orange bar represents the channel, the signal of that input. So some things that start with a channel can be a texture and a channel, but textures are usually only going to be a texture, because you can't really intelligently flatten that down to a single channel without losing a lot of information. So we'll come back to that. There might be ways to control clips with other clips, but for the most part, MIDI and other things like MIDI, like audio and OSC channels, those will come in as something that looks just like this. So in addition to that, we have generators. So let's go ahead and pull open our generator panel, which is right now just a few default things. We have pulse, sine, count. I had a lot of these out when the video started. So for now, let's just drop sine. Sine in is sine normalized. We also have 16ths. Right, so this stuff is all controlled from your tempo, which right now it's pretty rudimentary. You can just set a number up here. 120 is what it's defaulted to, and this pretty much lets you use these values anywhere else in the I/O tab. So currently there's not too many other places you can put these in, but one place you can use them is an effects. An effects clip is a very open-ended template for whatever it is you want it to do. Generally speaking, it accepts either a texture or a channel or both or many of both. So to kind of give you an example, let's actually open up the effects pane here, which looks like all the other panes, and we have just two options right now. They're very basic. This will, by the way, be something that's open source with GeoPix, so that you can actually build your own effects. That's going to be later on down the line. On release, there's probably going to be no open source aspects to this at all, but that will be added as soon as I have time to add that in a responsible manner. So here's a trail split. It says RGB and 0, and it's black. There's nothing going on. So what do we do with this? Well, as soon as I clicked on this, you might have noticed that over here, in addition to the attributes, we also have special inputs. These inputs are clips and chance, essentially what we've been talking about this whole time, either a texture or a channel. So to give you an example, if you want to put something here, you actually need to change your mode from select mode up here to connect. And once you do that, you can actually drag, you can see your cursor will change, you can drag things over here, and you can put a channel. The orange slider designates it as a channel. You can put that over here, and then you can put a texture in the clip folder. So for now, I'll just do this diagonal green. And as you can see here, our effects is now using both of those things together, and it's compositing it into one new clip. So over here, under effects, you can see we have something called composite. And using the scroll wheel, I'm just going to move through these different modes. And if you ever use Photoshop, you know what these look like, and you know what these are. These are essentially just blend modes between two textures. So difference is the most interesting looking one out of these small group of compositing modes I chose, but you get the idea. Basically, several inputs, one output, and that's what an effects is. And as far as what they can do, it's going to be very open-ended. I'll have a palette of effects I come up with myself. There'll be a template for GLSL in the future and other types of shader-based things. You can get as crazy as you want, conceivably. So that is how effects work, and that is also how generators work. To kind of show you the MIDI thing, what if I want to do this with a MIDI controller, right? So I've got my MIDI controller signal here. I can just go ahead and drag this over here into channel, and now I've actually got a responsive hand-controlled texture. This is pretty cool. I mean, you can make an effect out of this, and you can now project this onto your LEDs or your DMX lights or literally any other channel that you'd like. And that's what I'm going to show you next in just a moment. I actually think I have gone over pretty much everything. Macros will be the last thing I tell you about, and I'm not even sure they're going to show up in here in the end, but right now they do show up here. And a macro is the highest level preset you can have just about in GeoPix. It's pretty much a combination of everything that you have in your scene that creates a specific look. So we'll come back to that here in a moment. Let's see here. Interesting. Alright, so now that we've got this, I'm going to put the sine wave back in there for now, just as kind of doing something automatically. Alright, cool. So once you've developed your palette here, right, once you've built your clips and your presets and your macros, I'm sorry, not your macros, but your effects and everything else that you might want to use in your scene, we can now pop back over here to the editor and actually start to build stuff in our scene. So I'm going to go clear the viewport and start over. Got ourselves a clean, completely untouched viewport here, so let's just go and throw a few simple shapes in here to get started. So I'll grab a primitive. I'm going to go and use a plane. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's go ahead and stretch it up on Y. Let's go ahead and make this 1.5. Make it 2. 2 sounds like a good number. Let's go and put this up here at 100. Negative 100. Actually, let's do negative 200. Alright, then let's do 200, 100, 0. Okay, and let's go ahead and duplicate this again. Let's go and zero it out. And let's actually put this back to cube. And let's rotate it by 45 degrees. And let's go ahead and move it up to 50. Alright, cool. So this is not really a stage, but it's close enough for the purposes of this demo. Alright, so fixtures, we need to start putting lights and LEDs on our objects. So I'm going to go ahead and place this maybe right here. Negative 200, 20. Alright. Now the reason I'm putting it here is arbitrary. I just pretty much want it to be in front of the object it's going to be on, so I can click on it and select it later. In fact, I'm going to move it below the back so that it's right underneath. So, okay. Now I'll go over here to my holes, and I'll go ahead and add holes to my plane. And by the way, if this is new to you and you haven't seen hulls before and you don't know what they are, the last video I've done, video number 10, will actually tell you everything you might want to know about hulls and how they work. So check out that video if you'd like. So hulls, I'll select all of my hulls, and from my selection, I'll go ahead and generate a generator. And with this generator now selected and created, I can actually switch over to grid by lattice. And since our plane is twice as high as it is wide, I'll go ahead and use 10 by 20 as my array. And great. So that's done. Let's go ahead and move this generator back. I like to just have things easy to see, very easy to select as well. So I'm going to move that to 40. I'm going to duplicate that generator. I'm going to Shift P, unparent it. I'm going to move it over here. Gonna go ahead and put this on the other side. You know what? I'll just go ahead and duplicate this entire fixture. It's gonna be a little bit easier. Put this over here. 200. Negative 20. Great. Okay. So I'm going to take a quick break from setting this up here and just kind of mention one thing. You'll notice that this blue ramp is just kind of cycling through our scene. So I'm going to do two things. First thing is I'm going to actually go ahead and set up this default ramp, which is what you're seeing, to a circular ramp. So we get some symmetry and some perspective going. Next thing I'm going to do is turn on this button, which is actually the label's screwed up, but dynamic default projector is what that's supposed to say. And what that does is it essentially scales your working area to be the size of your pix. So in this case, if I were to draw an imaginary box around here, this is actually the bounding size of my screen area. So this is essentially in the background before you even get to projectors. It's just giving you some generic mapping that will always show content, just so you can just start throwing stuff out there and you can have your LEDs on if you want, and you can just see what's happening. So if you turn this on, it's going to slow your system down a little bit, but it's going to be constantly updating automatically. If you turn this off, that'll actually keep that from happening. So it's an optimization switch essentially. That might change, we'll see. Okay, so we have 2 towers of LEDs here. That's great. Let's just make a couple more. I'm going to make another fixture, and we're going to turn on our outliner so we can actually see this stuff. Let's actually name this. Let's call this left tower. We'll call this right tower. And the rule about generators is they'll always overwrite the pix you have. So if you have something you like and you don't think you're going to need to update it again, you can get rid of those generators and actually simplify your scene a little bit, which is what I'm going to do here. Delete those generators. We just have a fixture. If you're like me and you're kind of retentive about things being as simplistic as possible, you can also get rid of your hulls at this point. Although I wouldn't recommend it, because if you want to go through and tweak stuff Well, the holes are only necessary if you have a generator. If you don't have a generator, the holes don't do much for you, so yeah, I guess it's up to you. It's really not going to make too much difference, but it just makes things look a little bit cleaner in your viewport, like it does here. So, all right. Next thing is let's put some lights on the sides of this cube. All right, so I'm going to go back to holes. I'm going to add those 4 points. Generator from selection, and maybe we want this to just be what do we want this to be? Let's go ahead and make it another grid. Let's see, that's good in terms of density. Let's go ahead and make another fixture. Let's go ahead and put this here. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with our hull. Oops, got one too many. Go and select all of them. Generate from selection. And I'm sorry to constantly narrate what I'm doing. I just want to make it clear because I'm using a lot of hotkeys. What kind of steps I'm taking. Okay. Oops. Got a little bit out of. Alright, there we go. Okay. This one will be the same thing. We'll just make it to a another grid. Alright, and I want to do one more thing here. Let's go ahead and throw down another couple primitives. This will be a cube, so let's make this really small. That doesn't look right. There we go. Go ahead and just put this sort of random place. 150. Maybe 50, sure, why not? 50, 50. Alright. I'm partly doing this just so you can kind of get an idea for what you can do with the viewport. If you haven't seen this before, this is just kind of a free-form example. Okay, so I got this little bar kind of just sitting up here, center that. Alright. So now, let's say we have 3 or 4 parkans shooting up into the air up here, just kind of imagining what we could use for a different object. So we'll go ahead and put this up here. And we'll go ahead and add a hull from here to there. Alright, and we'll generate from that some picks, and we'll go ahead and put this generator, put it out here in front. Alright. Let's actually, yeah, 4 seems like a great number. Okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and delete that. You can actually go and delete these as well. So we can go ahead and name these as well. Cube left, cube right, and we'll name this light R. Alright, so these primitives, this is absolutely not necessary, by the way, but if you wanted to, you could group these so you can move them around later easier. There's really no need for that, but I'm going to leave it that way anyways, just so you can kind of see. Okay, so we have this light bar, and let's just assume this is a DMX fixture, and these are all WS2812B lights. So the main difference here is that this might have a red, green, blue element, but it's probably also going to have a white channel. It's going to probably have a strobe channel and some other things. So let's go and pretend that it has those two channels for simplicity. So I'm going to select these picks manually with this Control-A and open up the coordinate map, and as you can see, the default, which is RGB, is already here in place. So what I can do is actually go over here to Chance and just type R-G-B, which are the defaults, and then I'll go ahead and add another dash, and I'll go ahead and do W and S, so white and strobe. I'll hit enter, and you can see those things show up here. So that means we have our channels added, and we can actually start to use those channels in our system. Once I've done that, I can kind of just leave pixel mode or pix mode and go back to object mode. And I'm actually going to take the scale up to 3 so we can see these things, visually identify them as something different. So this might be a good place to save our stage. So we'll call this strange stage. And so we're saved. We can just keep working. Okay. So the next thing I want to show you, and really the most exciting thing I've probably been waiting to talk to you about, is projectors. Projectors are how you apply content to this structure that's not just the default blue ramp you've been seeing for basically a year in this video series. So let's go ahead and jump in there and show you what's going on. If I go to my Create tab and I drop a projector, immediately a couple things happen. You get this weird looking frustum kind of shape, like with the sides transparent and going off into nothingness, and you also lose all of your color. This is all intentional. Once you create this, the training wheels are off and you have to start putting stuff together yourself. So let's go ahead and first get some content flowing through our projector, because right now it's got no content and it has nothing to project, and our LEDs are black because there's nothing being shot at them. So this is actually fairly easy. Just to remind you, in the I/O tab, all of the clips you see here are viable options to push through your projector. So back here in Editor, there's a little conditional tab here that pops up called I/O Palette. So I/O Palette is it's another bug I just found. Okay, so I can scroll the viewport while I'm in here. Fun fact, if you're curious. Interesting. Why is this? Alright, there's a few bugs with this, but it's functional. So essentially, what you do is you click on a clip, and it just loads it into your projector. And you can also see right here the input preview is filled with the name of this clip. So this clip I have called Suck Me In, there's vertical blue, there's the default ramp, which we can put this right back on to where we were before, and as you can see we have a preview of our texture of our clip on our projector, but we also can see that being shot at our scene. You might be noticing that the frame rate now is actually starting to get hit pretty heavy, and that it would be accurate. This is a pretty intensive bit of computation that's going on at the back end to make this happen. I'm looking to optimize it. Hopefully I can, but just know that the performance hit is only when you're positioning and placing these projectors in your viewport. So, anyways, let's use this default ramp because it actually looks alright for the purposes of this tutorial. Let's actually scale it up. Over here under projector settings, you have your projector options, and you also have your transform options. So with both of these, I turn off dynamic default generator here. You can actually position this stuff very quickly and easily, both with transform tools, and also you have some options with this. But for now, I'm going to just move this up and scale down this size a little bit, and going to bump up the scale X until I get a somewhat proportional looking circle. That looks pretty close. I want it to encompass my two towers on the sides, so let's just bump this scale up until we swallow up the whole thing. All right, let's go a little bit further. So now that we've gotten this projector kind of over top of our whole stage, we don't really need to see this preview plane as much. It's kind of distracting, actually. So over here under preview opacity, we can just turn this down. I like to leave it at like 0.06, but you could turn it all the way off if you'd like. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to leave it pretty low, 0.03. All right. So here we have a projector shooting at our scene. It's an orthographic projector. And we can also just jump around and we can play with different clips. We can see what this stuff's going to look like immediately, instantly, with no waiting. So you can say, oh, this is kind of a cool pattern. I see this flowing diagonally. What happens if I rotate this? Well, if I rotate on X, I can pretty much shoot this up at the sky with a little bit of angle, and then you have a more distorted version of what you had before. A few other things that you can do very quickly and easily is change the way things repeat. So if I scale this down on X, I'm losing it over here, but I can actually change my extend from air color to extend, which will do kind of a stretching algorithm. I can also go to cycle, which will pretty much just loop this texture across all of infinity. This is a fun one because with this you can just start stretching and scaling, and you can find the right look for the right density of LEDs insanely fast. I can also just start rotating on other axes as well. You know, this one kind of looks like Matrix Rainfall or something like that, and it was a complete accident, right? I had a texture that looked like something else, and with the right tweaks that could take 30 seconds, you can get an amazing look in a very limited amount of time. So this is where the artistry comes in, and this is one of the things I really wanted to build into GeoPix 1.0 was enough flexibility to give you the ability to find happy accidents and to find interesting patterns that nobody else has ever found, right? You can take a piece of content and you can twist it and distort it and rotate it a specific way, and you can come up with something that nobody else has ever seen. And the content, as you can see, doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be very simple. So when you're working with DMX lights, low-res fixtures, this is a tremendously interesting way to create looks that is seriously underutilized in today's software. Most things are cue-based, look-based, which has got some advantages to it, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But just know that this exists so that you can be an artist and you can really get in there and tweak things and make things look the way you want them to, or find the way things look that are just interesting and surprising. So yeah, it's meant to be whatever you want it to be in that sense. So alright, but back to a more practical example. Let's go ahead and reset some of these things. Let's put this back up a little. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, okay, so let's scale this back out on X. Let's put our ramp back on here. Let's actually turn our preview opacity up, and let's get this scale just right. Cool, we got a circle again. Alright. I'm using this simple texture just so you can kind of see visually what's going on. I'm going to center it. Cool. Alright, well this is fun, and we have a projector in our scene and it's shooting a texture at our LEDs, but we can actually take this quite a bit further. Before I do, I want to show you a couple things here. Under routing, and this is a projector attribute, one last thing to show you. You have access to a perspective camera as well as an orthographic camera. If you are familiar with Maya, Max, and 3D tools, this is similar to how you UV map or project your textures, essentially. There'll probably be more options here in the future, things like spherical mapping, cylindrical mapping, but for now, perspective orthographic, and you can do a lot with these, so I'm going to leave it that way for now. Okay, so over here under routing, this is really important. This is, I'm not quite sure how I want to end up building an interface for this. This is still a little bit confusing and techy because you're typing in channel numbers and you're just seeing what happens, but let me know. I actually like your feedback on this if you have any thoughts. If you think this is confusing or if you understand this by the end of the video, definitely let me know because that's important to me. But right now, your routing is how you take your channels from your texture and how you apply that to your object. So here in the scene, we have mostly things that are RGB, right? So if I go back here to my fixture, if I click on any one of these points, you're going to see RGB. And if I open up my coordinate map, I can scroll to the bottom of this, and it all looks exactly the same, right? Every single one of them is an RGB channel. So what happens when I have RGB SW, which if you remember is strobe and white? Well, what if I want to put a different texture on my strobe and my white channels? Well, I would need to route one of the 3 channels from my texture to one of those 2 channels. And that happens through a projector. The projector is the portal through which content, 2-dimensional content, makes its way onto the 3D world and then onto your channels and out to your devices, ultimately. So over here under routing, I can go ahead and clear these. Well, actually, I can reset them to 0 manually or nothing. And as you remember, everything disappears. So if I just put red in R, here we go, we have a red channel. We can see that visibly. I can put a G in the green channel, which means we're going to have just green. I can also put the G in the red, green, and the blue channel, which means we're going to have green across the board. This is actually not working correctly because you should be seeing a white texture represented here, but don't worry about that. I will fix that eventually. But let's go ahead and talk about the object up here. So yeah, we have S and W. So if we grab this projector and we actually reset these to off and we put S under R, we now have we have red. Oh, I know what happened earlier. Okay, so now we have red here for R because we're putting our red texture to our S channel. And I want to show you another pane here, which is going to help you visualize this a little bit more. Based on what channels you have active in your scene, this is, by the way, your viewport channels, right? So you might have 5 or 6 channels, you might have 10 channels, you might have 15. But when it comes to visualizing things, you only have red, green, and blue to see it with your eyes, right? So Viewport Chance is essentially a way for you to shuffle your channels around so you can visualize your strobe pattern, for example, right? So right now we have our red channel from our ramp. Let's use our blue channel because that's a little bit brighter. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's use our blue channel like this. So we're taking our blue channel and we're putting it onto our strobe channel. So this would be a very slow strobe, obviously, but it's the only channel in action right now. Everything else is cleared out, which is why you see red channel being mapped to S. So this is a way for you to actually see and change the preview channels for your object channel. So if I left click and drag, I can actually change this. So I'm actually going to put this to white, which white is obviously red, green, blue, but it does look different in the viewport. So it's technically a 4th channel that you can use to preview stuff with. Alright, I know this is a lot, so let me actually step back and finish putting a few things together so you can see this in action. So I'm going to go and reset these to red, green, blue. And I'm going to click on this guy up here. It's actually fine. We're going to duplicate this projector. And we will make this small. As you can see right now, we're actually blending 2 textures together through the projector, so you can also blend lots of projectors together, which is going to be very interesting looking, and depending on what you're doing, very, very cool. However, I don't want that. I actually want to clear this out. I want to put my blue channel on my strobe channel. And then what I need to do after that is actually, let's just say this is going to be just a flasher, right? This is going to be a light bar, but it's not actually going to be an RGB bar. It's just going to be one color. It's going to be essentially either it's on or it's off. It's going to be a strobe fixture. So I'd actually want to go back over here, select my fixture, select all of my picks, and I can open up my coordinate map so you can see what's going on. And so I want to get rid of red, green, and blue. I just want to have strobe and white. Actually, no, let's just have strobe. We just have one channel. It's the simplest fixture anyone's ever seen. So I'll just type S, hit enter, and now we're just down to one channel. So once we've done that, you'll notice that this blue ramp no longer shows up on these dots. And that is because there's no red, green, blue channels for them to show up on. So if I open up the Viewport Chance here again, you'll see that we have red, green, blue, and white is being applied to S, or white is showing the value of S, which is our strobe channel. Red, green, and blue are showing exactly what they are usually showing, which is red, green, and blue. So if I want instead to visualize my strobe channel on the red channel, I could go over here to red being white, so our white channel being shown on red. This is confusing. I'm going to have to make this a little bit less confusing because even I'm confused when I built this. And then over here we have this fourth channel that became null because we set something else to what it was, so I can make this red. So now our strobe channel is being shown as red, and we've swapped basically those channels. So in a nutshell, that's how that works. You don't have to worry too much about this in the end, because ultimately if you set your channels right on your fixture and your projectors are routing things to the right channels, it's just going to come out the other end looking correct. So the problem is in your viewport you only have so many channels to see things with, so you kind of have to come up with a system to visualize things based on what you have. If you ever use a compositing software like Nuke or Toxic, you kind of may be familiar with this already, where you have like 10 passes maybe, and you got to see those passes with either your red, green, or blue channel, and the only way to see it is to shuffle things around. So that's the approach I'm taking here with the VP Chance. Alright, this is pretty much, I think, it in terms of projectors. So you can see here, I can have like a strobe type look over here using the 16ths. I can increase the tempo to 240. That's going to be something that gets developed later. It's just a placeholder. And you know, this is like a scene, right? So what's going to happen from here, and this isn't built yet, but this will be video number 12. There'll be a button somewhere that lets you take exactly what you see here in the viewport and save that to a preset. And a preset will essentially be a collection of projectors with assigned textures from your I/O port, and that is essentially a one-press trigger to like create this look on your screen. And that's what you're going to be using in the performance monitor. I'm sorry, the performance engine later on. And to kind of show you how flexible this can get, let me go and jump back over here to the I/O tab and change something. So trail split. Let's actually toss that onto our. Oh, is that it? No, it's like hidden. Interesting. Well, that's a little frustrating. All right, we're going to just pretend like this is the texture. So we have, I wanted to actually stick this guy here, trail split R, on our, oh, you know what, we can. Trail split LR. I can just type this in manually. Trail split LR. Okay, cool. So we've got this on here. And let's say we wanted to save this as a preset. We have a strobe going for our flasher, and we have this weird texture. And if you remember, our texture here is actually referencing two things. It's our diagonal green and then our sine wave normalized. So let's go ahead and stick our MIDI controller channel, the crossfader, into that slot. So if we hop back over here, you can actually see that we are live controlling this this texture with the knob on my MIDI controller. So it's pretty sweet. There's a little bit of lag here because this animation is happening from the center, but you know, there'll be all kinds of effects and flexibility here to make very instantaneous effects, strobes, everything you can imagine yourself you can build. But this is part of the preset, right? So when you save a preset, you're not just saving an autonomous look, you're also saving all of the inputs and all the configurations that come with that. So if I say I want a preset that has exactly what I see now, but it also has my MIDI controller connected to the invert function, that would be something I could do, right? So that when I trigger that preset, I know that this button, and this button all do certain things, and I can jam on those buttons, move those sliders, and actually get a playable interface from one press of a button. And I can press another button, and I can change that preset to a whole different collection of projectors at different angles with different clips. And so this will allow you to map out 5 or 6 different things kind of in a playful arrangement, and then when you're ready you can hit a button and you can go to your next group. This will also be used with the crossfader. So if you remember GeoPix 0.9 and virtually every VJ software known to people, there is essentially a slider that goes left and right. So you have your left deck, your right deck, and you can drop a clip, presumably in either of those decks. In the old GeoPix, we had a left-right system. It was pretty simple and it worked pretty well. But this new system is going to be a left-right deck where the left and the right deck is a preset, and there'll be a third preset that overlays all of those other presets. I'm not sure how that's going to look exactly. That performance engine is something I haven't quite hashed out yet, but there'll be a left and a right, so you can not only trigger things in the left or the right deck, and you can live just in the left deck if you want, but you can also fade between those two inputs. So there's going to be all kinds of crazy things you can do with the performance engine that's going to leverage what you set up ahead of time. So that's a whole video by itself, maybe 2 videos, I have no idea, but that's coming later on this summer. But for now, just understand that if you save a preset from here, you're going to have everything that comes with that preset in the viewport available to you in the performance engine later. Alright, so yeah, here I am. I can save again. Let's go ahead and just call this strange stage. And when you click save, it's not only going to save your viewport and what you have in your scene, it's going to save everything you have in this viewport as well. And your settings, which by the way, there's not much to show here. This is essentially a lot of options you can change about your scene. This will change probably a lot, but there'll be some settings you can tweak here as well. So yeah, I think that about covers it. Projectors are going to be cool. There's going to be a max limit for now of 8 projectors, so you can't actually go beyond that. You can have up to 8 projectors in your scene. I think we could move that limit to 16, and I could probably maybe move it even higher. It would definitely require some extra modification of how the back end's handling things, but we'll just see how far 16 and 8 projectors gets us. I think 8 will actually get people pretty far if they are creative with the use of their projectors, because as you saw, you can do all kinds of cool stuff with just a couple. I can rotate this with just the same texture on it and get whatever the hell this is. Pretty wild, right? I can also start dropping other textures in here and just get crazy with it. Yeah, so I could show you real quick the this video's gone on for probably a long time. Wow, I think I'm reading an hour. Congratulations if you're still with me. One last thing then, I'm going to go ahead and show you the perspective camera, and then I'm going to get this video over with so you can get on with your lives. So we have a perspective camera, and the frustum doesn't change yet to reflect that, but let's pretend it does. We're going to shift this, rotate it up. We're actually going to change this from cycle to default color so we can see what is actually getting hit and what's not. Oh, let's change this to, there we go, you can see the projection better. So this is cool. We got some symmetry, we've got some projection perspective going, which means what was a plain old ramp before is actually this kind of edgy V-shaped circular ramp. And what's really crazy is what we can do with that from here. Let's say we change it from error color to extend. So it's kind of interesting. That's going to be more circumstantial, but let's go to cycle. There we go. That's pretty rad. Cycle is going to repeat the texture, but then we have mirror, which is pretty cool too. Yeah, so both of those will be cool. I think they'll be cooler with maybe a vertical line. Well, you get the idea. There's just an unlimited number of ways you can configure this, and you know, sky's the limit in terms of how things are overlaid with each other. And as you can see, it doesn't really matter how many projectors we have. The viewport obviously takes a hit in terms of performance, but in terms of the back end, this is a very efficient system, so it can scale up pretty well once you have your scene built. It can handle virtually any configuration of those 8 projectors, maybe 16, and you can just go from there. Alright, well, thanks for watching. This was video number 11, and number 12 will be fun. Hopefully I'll be out in the garage with an actual setup and LEDs and lights, maybe some DMX lights as well if I get all that working in time. And yeah, stay tuned. Thanks for watching.